And what does AI allow us to do? It allows us to do stuff bigger and quicker. If we're going to make good decisions, we can make them bigger and quicker. If we're going to make bad decisions, we can make them bigger and quicker. So as a result, we need people to be making informed decisions about how to use the technology so they can get all the benefits from it in the most de-risked way.
Welcome to the grand finale of our special 5-part generative AI series. My brilliant co-host, Professor Kerensa Jennings, and I couldn't think of a better way to wrap things up than with today's guest. A true heavyweight in the world of AI and enterprise IT, Matt Armstrong-Barnes, the CTO for AI at Hewlett Packard Enterprise. With a career spanning over 25 years, Matt has led game-changing transformation programs across public and private sector. He's a fellow of the British Computer Society, a chartered engineer, and a passionate advocate of open source tools that make AI accessible for all. In this episode, we unpack the good, the bad, and the downright essential when it comes to enterprise AI adoption, from the surprising environmental cost of an AI query to the perils of AI washing, and even how to explain AI to a 6-year-old. Matt's insights will leave you both informed and inspired. So buckle up for an insightful, thought-provoking, and thoroughly enjoyable conversation that's the perfect send-off for this generative AI series. Let's dive straight in. Matt, thank you so much for coming on the Tech Leaders podcast. We've been looking forward to this one big time, I think it's fair to say. So thank you for accepting our invitation. Kerensa and I have got loads of things we would like to talk about today. But let's kick off with a bang. What excites you most about the current surge in generative AI innovation, Matt? I
think from a Gen AI, it's really interesting the fact you talk about the current surge. We can actually date generative AI back to the 1950s. So it's not really, if you're an AI guy like me, it's not a new thing. You know, some of the core technology around transformers came out in 2017 and went generative in 2018. But it really has captured everybody's imagination. And we're starting to see it actually drive both the adoption of broader AI use cases and generative AI use cases when it comes to how we can leverage the data that supports those use cases extremely effectively. And it means we are moving much closer towards this concept of, so if anyone remembers Garry Kasparov, the chess grandmaster, he had this concept called centaur chess, which is, so if anyone doesn't know, a centaur is part person, part horse for the Harry Potter movies. And it is about how people and AIs can work together much more collaboratively to drive a better outcome. And I think that's really starting to see, because generative AI allows more broadly humans to interact with machines in ways that they have historically had some constraint around, that ultimately drives a significantly better outcome.
Fantastic.
Are there any sort of Gen AI tools in your home life that you're making the most of with your family or yourself? Are the things that you just enjoy playing with?
So as a self-professed IT geek, so I do quite a lot of coding still. I started off my career as a programmer back then, before they were called developers. So I'm still writing things and interacting with the Gen AI tools. I do think there's some challenges that come when it comes to the more popular, generally available ones around some of the privacy concerns, what's happening to my personal data, what's happening from a security perspective, intellectual property. So as a result, at a personal level, I do use these techniques, but I use them very carefully in terms of the types of information that I'm exposing. And I use them sometimes as a way of bouncing some ideas, because generative AI is a great tool for creating and helping me go through and refine something. But really, it needs that human input to help shape and drive something that then I can see whether or not there's any gaps in my thinking to ultimately allow me to create something that's much better and much more evolved.
So you see it as a bit of a partnership?
Absolutely. One of the big problems that I've seen with, I speak to CIOs, CDOs, CXOs, CEOs across the world, big organizations, small organizations. And the problem I've seen over the years is they've got this massive hammer. And 3 years ago, it said artificial intelligence, and they were desperately looking for nails. Now it says generative artificial intelligence, and they're still looking for nails. It's all about having the right set of tools available for you to use and choosing from your toolkit the outcome that you're trying to drive, and then building together with the right assets that you've got available to you. If you do that, you're going to create something that is of value, either at an individual level or an organizational level, that is going to drive a better outcome, meaning that you're going to make better and more informed decisions. And that's really where we're kind of seeing AI playing this critical role around acceleration of the creation of assets, acceleration of finding hidden value in data, and ultimately allowing organizations to make better decisions at a faster rate.
Absolutely. So, Matt, could I just pause the AI stuff? Because in my head's going crazy now and I want to go down hundreds of rabbit holes because obviously someone as knowledgeable as yourself. But the listeners who may not be familiar with yourself, could you give us a little bit of a background story on your career and how you arrived at the point of going in the AI direction, and a little bit about your sort of current role and what the purpose of your role is?
Yeah, sure. So I've been in the IT industry I've got some grey hairs. They don't come across particularly well on camera, but I've got grey hairs. So I've been in the IT industry for a long period of time. I'm a computer scientist, degrees in computer science. I've got a master's degree in AI. I've toyed with the thoughts of doing a PhD for a number of years, but never quite managed to get there. So I come out through the application development route. And when we're talking about sort of large, very complicated apps dev, developer lead, technical architect, solution architect, then working at sort of CTO type roles. And ultimately in HPE, I took on the role as chief technologist for artificial intelligence more than 7 years ago. In the AI world, to do the job that I do, it's a lifestyle choice. So 7 years ago, I said, I'm happy to dedicate significant amount of work time, personal time, development time, everything around specializing in artificial intelligence. And that means that I work with HPE's product groups around building out our AI strategies in terms of what we're doing. I work with HPE's customers to help them understand how to make use of this technology to really drive transformational outcomes. So I build customers' AI strategies with them. I work out how to implement projects. And then I make sure that we're bringing the best of HPE's innovation into our customer base. So it's pretty broad remit, because the HPE portfolio covers, everything from the hardware around acceleration through the software stacks that are going to live on top of that, right the way into our services engagements. So really it's about bringing the weight of HPE and our portfolio and the massive ecosystem of partners that we've got to drive some very, very complex customer conversations in the AI space. Because one of the things I always talk about with customers, AI is a team sport. So it is all about bringing together the right collection of experts, both inside your own organization and leveraging a broad ecosystem, because together with AI and GenAI, you really can achieve some quite groundbreaking innovation and drive your organization into a much more digital native type approach, which is massively appealing to the generations that we've got coming through, because we need newer types of business models, newer ways of interacting with people at different pace and with different levels of innovation.
So you talked about the different generations coming through. Let's roll back time to when you were a little boy.
Wow.
What got you interested in tech? What did you first do? How did you first start experimenting with tech?
Oh, wow. Okay. That's in the dim and distant past. So my very first computer was a BBC Micro Model B with 32K of memory. So I started programming that at a very young age. And I've just been absolutely, the technology industry, I find incredibly diverse in terms of what we're trying to do. It's such an enormous level of innovation. And ultimately, I'm a complete computer science geek at heart, and I've worked in the industry for a long period of time. I get to work with lots of other really, really, people who are very passionate about technology. And I think one of the big challenges we've got is getting to the point where we, as technologists, explain what is happening in a much more consumable way. I think probably one of the biggest challenges I've faced in my career was moving from staring at a screen and writing code to talking to people about it, trying to explain some of these very complicated technological concepts to the more broader collection of people, democratizing information technology to make it much more readily available. And one of the challenges I think we face is AI is kind of going through this massive explosion. Lots and lots of people are getting involved now. And the core of the AI discipline who've been doing this for, some of my colleagues have been doing this for decades. We have kind of a responsibility to make sure that as the technology space, more people get involved, that they're doing it from a position of knowledge. Because ultimately, we can make some poor decisions in the AI space. And what does AI allow us to do? It allows us to do stuff bigger and quicker. If we're going to make good decisions, we can make them bigger and quicker. If we're going to make bad decisions, we can make them bigger and quicker. So as a result, we need people to be making informed decisions about how to use the technology so they can get all the benefits from it in the most de-risked way.
And when you were a little boy and you were starting to program on BBC Micro, what kinds of things were you doing? Like, what kinds of things were you inventing back then? How did you kind of unleash your inner computer genius?
It was all games.
Yeah.
all games.
Did you program your own? Did you invent your own?
I did a few times, yes. I made some disastrously bad games that would never have been a commercial success, but they were a huge fun to write. And I could share my mates at computer club. Yes, I did go to computer club. I could share my mates at computer club, and we could all have a bit of a laugh as we experimented moving things around on screens. But I continue to program today. I think it's a core part of the computer science discipline. And one of the things I find is people don't understand that there are differences between computer science and information technology. So computer science is around the design and creation of digital assets, and information and technology is the usage and maintenance of those digital assets. And one of the problems I see in the AI world is democratization of the IT side of artificial intelligence. Absolutely brilliant. The democratization of the computer science side of artificial intelligence really is something that we should try and control, because it's really easy to write inefficient AI systems if you don't have the right computer science background. And one of the challenges is you can write an AI that will arrive at the same outcome, but if you do it inefficiently, it's going to be using significantly more power. And that has huge implications across the planet. So as a result, democratization of the information technology side of artificial intelligence is great. The computer science side, how you design artificial neural networks, should really be done in a way that has the right level of expertise to make sure that we're doing it in the right way, driving the right kind of outcome, and doing things in the most efficient, maintainable and supportable way.
I wanted to get a definition from you, Matt. Okay, you seem very good at explaining things in very, very simplistic terms, or, able to explain things in layman's terms, shall we say. So my daughter, we were walking around a Christmas market yesterday, and my 6-year-old, we took a photo, and I said, it doesn't matter that I've got a mud patch on my knee. I'll just take it out using AI on my phone. And I was met with the immortal question, Daddy, what is AI? So I made a pig's ear of explaining it. So my question to you is, Matt, how can I explain what AI is to a 6-year-old?
Oh, okay, that's an interesting one. I think the way I explain it, you have to tell me whether or not this would resonate with a 6-year-old. So artificial intelligence is about this might be a bit complicated, but it's about using algorithmically driven techniques to find hidden patterns in data. Where generative AI is around the creation of digital assets. So they're actually trying to do two different things. I think if I were to explain that to a 6-year-old, I would say that AI techniques are tackling problems for challenges with data. So to your mud on your knee, I have a problem. So the data is the picture and the mud is the problem. What I need the AI to do is find the mud on the picture, and then I can work out how to remove it. Whereas if I were to say, once I've removed it, what do I put in its place? Well, now I need to create something. I need to create whatever image that the AI has found the borders of and I've removed. I can now need to create a digital asset that's going to go in that place. That's what generative AI does. So that's hopefully using your mud on clothing analogy. That would work for a 6-year-old.
Well, my answer was far less sophisticated. It was computers solving problems that humans can't solve. That's what I said instead. If that's what AI is, but there we go. I think I'll use your one. But so can we dive into use cases of generative AI, Matt? I know you've got some strong feelings on this. Should we just jump straight in? What are the use cases, and what are your thoughts on use cases for generative AI?
So I'm not a fan of use cases, and I'll explain why. So you could have the best use case in the world. However, if you don't have the right data in the right volume, with the right variety, with the right characteristics associated with it, you can't do anything with that use case. So before you start thinking about doing anything with AI, you need to look at the data that you've got and how you can use it with these algorithms, be they AI algorithms or generative AI algorithms. Once you've tackled that, and really what you need to start thinking about is, right, when I'm trying to address a business challenge, what's the business challenge? Well, a lot of business challenges will fit into an existing business process or a new business process. And what you need to look at is where the data that you've got around the change of the business process, where the two come together, that's something that you can do with AI. And then when it comes to AI, you either need to use classification, clustering, or regressing, because that's what algorithms do. So it's about choosing that right tool to tackle the problem. In my experience, if organizations are talking to you about use cases, it means they're trying to sell you a use case.
Yeah.
Think about it from a data transformation, data first perspective, and you'll have much more success, because trying to find the data to fit a use case is significantly more challenging than trying to find the data and then work out which use cases you can execute against that data.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I was fascinated to actually get some of the statistics underpinning that exact point, because I always say exactly the same thing. BCG say that only 6 or 7% of the 147 exabytes of data that are being produced this year alone are going to actually be stored. And of that, under 50% is usable. So most of it is dark data, which is not classified correctly. It's not accessible. It's not necessarily useful. And to your point, doesn't necessarily have the attributes that will mean it can be applied to a use case, even if in theory the use case is perfect, as a theoretical construct. So it is all about the data.
Yeah, totally agree. I think looking at it from a data perspective, if we think about, data science, and everyone talks about data science, 50% of a data scientist's job title is data. Everyone focuses on this, the sexy science part. How can I do that? Well, in actual fact, if we start to think about the fact that data scientists, we know that there is a general skill shortage in the AI space. We know that there's a skill shortage in data scientists. What do lots of organizations have? Well, actually, they've got lots of people who understand their data, and they probably understand it in a way that a data scientist never could. So as a result, leveraging some of your existing skills base to help you understand the data that you already have it gives you a fantastic asset on which you can then build a much broader AI strategy and work out what you're going to do with your data. We have to bear in mind as well that data science is an experimental discipline. So as a result, it might well be that you have some data and you want to start experimenting with it and trying to find out these hidden patterns. You could use lots of algorithmically driven techniques in order to achieve that, but you need your data to have a good level of cleanliness. Have you removed any outliers? Have you spotted any anomalies? But also, if you don't apply the organizational knowledge associated with that, it becomes difficult to spot. I'll give you an example. So let's say I'm just looking at a statistical distribution of age. So you look at a traditional bell curve associated with that, and me looking at it through a data science lens will say, yeah, that looks absolutely perfect. If I were to see a statistical distribution that favoured people of a certain age, I might say that's wrong. Our data's wrong. Where in actual fact, if I'm selling certain types of insurance, my distributions could be very different, or just around age. So without that domain-specific knowledge about the data that you have, just looking at it through a data science lens doesn't actually drive you to a good understanding of the data that you've got. So lots of organizations talking about how do I get going. You've got fantastic assets in terms of the people who are working with your data on a daily basis. Get them to help you get your data to a level of maturity. Once you've done that, finding and executing AI use cases is pretty trivial. So it is really about taking that data up approach instead of use case down. Because the other problem I find with use case down is customers that I've worked with, I engage them and they say, Matt, I've got 100 AI use cases. I'm like, okay, great. How did you find those? And they've been stuck in this ideation utopia, which is, what can we do with AI and GenAI? And the answer to that is, well, you're limited by your imagination. If you're limited by your imagination without the practical grounding of what you can do with it based on the data that you've got, you're never going to go anywhere. You're going to end up with a wall with lots and lots of sticky notes on it, telling you all of the wonderful things that technology can bring, and you're never actually going to properly achieve any of the outcomes you're trying to drive using either AI or GenAI.
This episode is part of the Tech Leaders Podcast AI Series 2.0, brought to you by Be Digital. At Be Digital, we empower leadership teams to maximize value from their technology investments. Our data and AI services help businesses fully embrace the potential of artificial intelligence. We prepare your data, we streamline your processes, and ensure robust governance so that AI works effortlessly to drive real results. Curious to learn more? Visit bedigitaluk.com or follow us on social media to discover how AI can transform your business.
What are the kinds of questions you would recommend, our listeners who are tech leaders, business leaders in tech firms, what do you recommend they ask of their tech teams to try to evaluate whether or not the data is in a good state, and or to start searching out what needs to be done to actually make it into a better state?
Yes, I think when it comes to the exec level conversation, so I'll answer that question as you'd imagine, slightly longer. My conversations with an AI tech leader go in one of 5 directions. So the first one is the executive level conversation, which is, what's my operating model? How do I build my business case? How do I organizationally structure myself? What's my AI strategy? The next 2 are, right, how do I execute? And I get asked this a lot around use cases. So how do I execute an AI use case or a Gen AI use case? And I'll park that for a second. The next one is, what do I do around data? And the final one is, how do I execute a technology strategy associated with this? When it comes to the data conversation, it's a case, and you can kick off all of these streams independently. So you can start working on your AI strategy as you're also working around, okay, what am I doing from a data perspective? You can start doing some tech evaluation. You can start doing some initial ideation once you get the feedback from what you're doing with data to start analyzing use cases. So it's about kicking off, programs of work, multiple activities that you need to do. And I'll loop back as a good way of starting some of this stuff in a second. When it comes to data, it's basic questions like, who owns it? How do you make sure that it is of quality? How do you make sure that it has good statistical distribution? How do you make sure that I'm capturing the right information? All of these kind of basic questions around what you're doing with data. Where's it stored? Can I get access to it? Once I've got access to it, who accessed it? Why did they access it? How long did they have it for? How did they transform it? And how have they securely disposed of it? These are questions that organizations, for lots of existing reasons around legislation, should already know already. But pulling them together in a way that allows you to understand that means you get a better and more holistic view of what you're doing from a data perspective. When it comes to talking about things that you're doing from a strategic perspective or, use cases or technology, one of the ways that I like to engage with organizations is, can we do an initial maturity assessment? So we do that at HPE. We come in, we work with organizations, and we'll evaluate what's happening across the various streams that they've got running, and ultimately pull that into say, right, okay, for example, public sector have fantastic governance. And actually, you don't need to do a lot in the governance space because you can add in some additional steps into existing governance. You can add in some additional questions. And as a result, quite quickly, you can mature your existing governance frameworks to cover AI and GenAI. Other organizations might need to mature their governance because they're not strong. So it is all about having that, broader, more maturity-oriented view to help you focus in on across all of the streams that you're going to run to say, well, actually, I would say this when I'm a technologist. I don't need to do ML ops because I know how to do ML ops, but I do need to focus on my governance or what organizational structure is going to work best for where I've got my data scientists placed across my organization.
I'm really keen to understand what you come across in terms of like what are organizations doing wrong with this stuff? What do they fall down on the maturity assessment typically, Matt?
Yeah, so I did try and distill this into a number of key areas where organizations struggle. So I think the first one probably is, and I say this, as I said, I've got some grey hairs, the old field of dreams, build it and they will come.
Yes.
Yeah, they don't. Always start off with a real business problem. What are you trying to achieve? Don't do technology for technology's sake. Don't try and use AI as a way of achieving business transformation. These things are ultimately, you're trying to do technology-led transformations or building something just in a laboratory. If you build it in a laboratory, it will live in a laboratory and it will die in a laboratory. Make sure that you understand the data that you're using because most lab-created data is very clean. Lots of organizations don't live in that world. And if you start pushing lower quality data through an AI system, ultimately you're going to drive lower quality outcomes. Governance is a critical one. Get it wrong with too much governance and you're just not going to do anything. Get it wrong with too little governance and you're just going to create interesting science projects. So getting that balance right associated with how you select the fact that you are going to try and implement AI into your organization, it does need to be governed and it needs the right kind of governance steps associated with that. Ultimately, that means that you're going to drive the right kind of outcomes. Next, one of the other problems that I see with a use case oriented approach is what happens. I've identified a use case. I've allocated some budget associated with that use case and I've built a tech stack and now I've deployed that use case. When the next use case comes along, what do I get? I get some budget allocated to a use case. I build a tech stack and I implement that use case. What have I got? 2 tech stacks. We know AI skills are in short supply and the AI tech stacks that you need are also complex to manage and run. So as a result, if I've got 2 of them, I'm doubling my cost. So when it comes to looking at how you implement your AI native architecture that runs multiple levels associated with it, you do that in a consistent way. Because again, it means that you're not building a tech stack each time. You can leverage tech stacks that you've already deployed. And if you think about things like scale up front in terms of how you're going to build out your tech stack, it means that you can deploy AI systems significantly quicker because you've put in a lot of the plumbing. You've got yourself ready to build your AI system.
Yeah, absolutely. You touched upon skills there, Matt. I think this is a big conversation for most organizations. So what critical skills should organizations be looking to procure, but also more importantly, train to stay competitive in the AI era, if that makes sense? What type of skills do organizations need to start thinking about?
It's very dependent on size, this question. I get asked this quite a lot, so depending on size. So if I try and tackle it from a large organization and zero it down into smaller organizations as well, because I think organizations of any size can benefit from this technology. It's not just limited to the large organizations, large firms. So the first one is it's a team sport. It's not all about single individual data scientists working on things. For example, when it comes to ethics, don't talk to me about ethics because I'm looking at statistical distributions of data. I'm not built that way. So as a result, I need to work with somebody who will think about some of the ethics and compliance associated with what's being built. I'm an engineer, I'm a computer scientist, I'm a builder. Give me a problem and I'll build associated with it. I need somebody else to help me understand whether or not I'm building it the right kind of way. So building that team associated with what you're trying to do is absolutely critical from a large organization, helping people understand how to engage with stakeholders, identification of business problems, understanding the data that you've got in your organization. And this is where it starts to get complicated because you do need some skill associated with the algorithms that you're going to be using. So you need some of that sort of data analytics and data science type capability, some AI skill. And I'll talk about the importance of skill in a second. If I drop down to smaller organizations, you might not necessarily be able to create large teams of people. What you can do here is AI is a well-trodden path. The tools and techniques that you need to build an AI system have already been engineered into libraries and frameworks. You don't need to understand the maths. What you need to be able to do is understand how to take your business problem and plug it together with an algorithm that some very, very clever person has embedded into a C library that you can use because it's super efficient, super performant, and is going to be maintained and operated by, very probably the open source community. So it's going to iterate and keep very relevant. So in those situations, it's about skilling yourself up on the tools and frameworks that are available and then bringing those into your organization to leverage them. AI and GenAI have some similarities in this space. There are three main ways that you can bring AI in. Firstly, you can build it yourself, which means that you get the market differentiation. It's absolutely targeted at your data and what you're trying to achieve. You can buy one that somebody else has already built. And in the GenAI space, you can bring in a foundational model to help you really accelerate what you're trying to do. But again, you need to make your data ready for the algorithm that somebody else has already done. So it's much more around a sort of data problem. Or you can do a hybrid of the two, where you bring an algorithm that somebody else already has done, and you bring 20% of the data. Bit more skilled, technical, nuanced. A lot of the challenges here around intellectual property, because if somebody's done the vast majority of the work, who owns the IP associated with the solution? In all of those situations, you need some AI skill. And you need to do that because I've come across a number of customer situations where they've brought in an external entity and they've had AI done to them. One of the things is AI is so dependent on data. There's the great analogy by Sir Clive Humby, which talks about data is the new oil, not because oil is a value and data is a value, but because they both have similar properties to liquid. They're changing shape all of the time. So as a result, if you don't have any internal capability and the shape of your data changes, your AIs, their performance starts to degrade. They'll start to drift. So as a result, you need people who can understand AI and its relation to your data. So if your data changes, you can understand the implications that it's got on the AI systems that you have deployed.
What kind of QA do you recommend people undertake and how often to make sure that doesn't happen?
Yeah, so I think there's great tools that you can use that will do a lot of this for you. Especially, so if you've got a production system that is deployed, you can use tools that do things called drift detection, and what they'll look is to make sure that the AIs are continuing to perform at an optimal level. And if they stop performing at an optimal level and they're constantly monitoring them, what you can do is you can bring that back out. So some organizations that I work with do complete automation where models start to drift. They'll kick off an automated cycle, extremely important. I'll come back to that actually in a second. Kick off an automated cycle to rebuild their AI with the new data and stand it up. I'm a big fan of human in the loop. If it's not performing, there's going to be a reason. So you need to do some investigation to work out. Might well be that you've done a new product development. You've launched a new product. You've done something internally that you haven't subsequently trained the AI on. So it just doesn't know. So as a result, right, okay, well, because if that is happening, you need to change your internal process to make sure that when you launch a new product, your AI is updated. And if you do that in an automated way, you're not going to spot those blind spots. The other one is, if you're going to measure something, which is really important, both from a success perspective or also how it's performing, in order to measure something, it has to be repeatable. And the best way to make something repeatable is to automate it. So again, great tools that you can use throughout your AI lifecycle that will provide that level of automation, meaning that you can get the measurability. So personally, as well as HPE, we're big fans of the open source community. Massive levels of innovation have happened in the open source world to provide that kind of end-to-end tool chain that you need that provides the automation, as well as a great set of tools that will look at some of the QA activities, not only from a data perspective, but how your models are performing, and then also how they're operating in a production setting so that you can spot if things aren't going in the way that you're expecting them to.
Can I also just take you back when you talked about the efficiencies that you need to think about and the efficiencies relating to sustainability in particular? Could you tell us a little bit about what you understand about the climate impacts of using particularly generative AI?
Yeah, so I need to go back to, so there's some academics who've done some research. So for example, some academics, so not me, not HPE, some academics have worked out that to put ChatGPT through one training cycle produces in the region of 300 tons worth of CO2. So I, for one, could not comprehend what 300 tons worth of CO2. So I did a bit of analysis. So that will take the average family saloon car from the Earth to the moon. It won't get you back to planet Earth again, but it will get you back to the International Space Station with a couple hundred miles left in your tank. International Space Station powered by HPE. We do run AI workloads in space. So the environmental impacts are pretty significant. And as a result, what we need to think about is, so firstly, ask your questions carefully, because every question that you ask uses or burns through some water to keep these very large generative AI tools cool. It's water that we could use for much better purposes than for educational purposes where people are using these techniques. So I think there's quite a lot to be said around the environmental impact of doing this. When you start thinking about building AI systems, the first thing is do a proper analysis. You can work with an organization like HPE, where we've got an extensive ecosystem of partners. And what we can do is we can help you understand whether or not what you're trying to do has already been done by somebody else. There are great places you can go where you can get open source tools, open source models with very clear licensing agreements that already might well have tackled the problem that you're trying to tackle. So it becomes less about how I build something new and more about evaluation of what's already there, working out if the data that I've got is going to fit those models, whether or not I need to fine tune, whether or not I need to perform some other technique like retrieval augmented generation associated with bringing my data and a model that somebody has already done together. Ultimately, that means I'm using less power because training AIs and subsequently tuning them, hyperparameter optimization, you can tell these people who came up with these acronyms don't work in marketing, is extremely computationally intensive. So whereas running inference, which is running models and spinning them up, is less computationally intensive, meaning you can still get the benefit from it without actually having to build it from scratch.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. No, that's really useful. So I wanted to get your thoughts on what industries you think are likely to be most impacted by AI innovation over the next 5 years. And when I say impact, I'm not leading that positive, negative, just impact generally. Which industries do you think stand out?
I'm going to answer that question slightly differently, which is I think the key challenge industry faces the level of regulation. So financial services, for example, common one, everyone says, financial services must be a major benefiter of using algorithmic different techniques. And they are very mature, but the regulator has yet really to catch up with some of the most innovative AI techniques. And also we have some of the challenges around explainability. So how did the model arrive at the answer that it arrived at? Key challenges associated with industries like financial services. We're seeing retail starting to take, with a lot of the online retailers and helping people make buying predictions. AI techniques have played a significant role in that space for quite a while. Some of the big benefiters most recently, pharma, in terms of accelerated drug discovery. We know that drug discovery, it costs a lot of money and it takes a long period of time. Anything that accelerates that has both a big material impact in terms of the financial benefits that the drug companies get, but also being able to bring new and innovative products to market a lot quicker, which ultimately can benefit us in terms of helping tackle some illnesses and ailments. Other areas where we've seen really interesting AI innovation is in things like healthcare. This isn't diagnosis. This is basic things like route planning. How can I make sure that I've got the right clinician in the right part of the hospital with the right patient, with the right clinical equipment, all at the same time? These are AI basic problems that means that we can drive significant efficiencies that we need to do in our existing hospital systems, and they need to be the same around the world because we've got some challenges in this space. So bringing in AI techniques to tackle some of these problems really are ways that we can benefit across industry. And we are also seeing that one deployment characteristics in one industry does actually transpose well into another. So the hospital being a prime example, highly autonomous vehicles, intelligent ways of routing have been worked on significantly by lots of organizations. So we can use those techniques and bring them into, we've got some very large hospitals in this country, multiple entrances, multiple departments. And as a result, it's quite easy to get lost. Using some of this route planning type technology can drive massive efficiency savings.
The elephant in the room with AI, from the scaremonger people at least, is jobs displacement. Obviously, it's a controversial topic, and there's been a lot of doom-mongering amongst the cynics, and obviously there's a lot of positivity from more sort of pro-AI viewpoints as well, in terms of, when new technology gets created, it typically creates jobs. It doesn't destroy jobs. That's what the history shows. What is your thoughts on this matter, Matt? Do you have any view on this?
Yeah, so I think firstly, I'm of the camp that AI will create roles. However, I think in order to benefit from those AI created roles, you need to understand at least a little bit about the technology. There's still quite a lot of misunderstanding and misinformation about what AI is capable of doing. And as a result, I think if it's one of those ones where if you embrace it and understand the role that it's going to play in your organization or your life, then you can have a much better role to play in the AI-enabled economy. So ultimately, I think in order to be successful career-wise going forward, you have to have at least a basic understanding. And I think the people who will be most effective are the ones who still believe the AI hype and believe that it is capable of achieving things that it isn't. So as we became much more digitally native, we need to now evolve. And the people who've survived in the digital economy are the ones who are digitally native or upskilled themselves in the digital world. The same is true for AI. I think if you upskill yourself, and you don't need to understand the maths, you don't need to get that level of detail, unless you're my job, that is, but you do need to know what you can do with it, how you can use it. And because going forward, everyone is going to have this set of tools in front of them, and one of them will be AI, another one will be generative AI, another one might be advanced analytics. If you can pick up and use those tools in your daily job, then you become significantly important to employers going forward. In the same way that we had with word processors, in the same way that we did with the printing press. Those people who understood how to use word processors became still as in demand. Those people who said, I still want to work on pen and paper, are the ones who struggled because they didn't keep up with the latest evolutions that are just ultimately going to happen associated with what we're doing. I think AI is quite a big step, but we have to bear in mind, generative AI was created in the 1970s. The technology's 50 plus years old. Artificial intelligence, I think, has its 70th birthday. Is it 2025 or 2026? So it's, the concept has been around for 70 years. So this is not new. It's just become something that everybody is talking about because generative AI has captured everyone's, emotional contexts so rapidly. And as a result, it's created this degree of worry from a role perspective. It's not new. If you're in the AI world, I've been working with GenAI techniques for 5, 6, 7 years, AI techniques for significantly longer. So it is about making sure that you are as upskilled as you can and have that at least. And our CEO talks about this. He talks about having an AI minor. Have an AI minor, and then you'll definitely be relevant in the digitally enabled, algorithmically driven economy that we're moving into.
And would you mind just sharing with us, a little bit about the history of the way that GPUs were originally linked together as part of the video gaming industry and how that's now become the source of the amazing power that we are unleashing with generative AI. Just talk a little bit about the origins of that.
So this is ultimately goes back to AlexNet. So created very innovatively by a guy called Alex. So he was doing a PhD and he wanted to enter his algorithm into a competition, quite a famous one called ImageNet. And associated with doing that, he constructed his algorithm, but it was taking too long to train. So he spoke to a whole bunch of his supervisors, and ultimately it was going to take him a number of years to go through all of the training cycles. As it happened, he was a gamer, and over a weekend, he ported his algorithm from running on a CPU to running on an NVIDIA GPU. It had a 10-fold performance increase on the training times because GPUs are better at processing the mathematical workloads than CPUs. He entered it into this ImageNet competition and he ended up winning so significantly that NVIDIA went, wow, there really is something in this GPU acceleration using CUDA, which is a development framework, and the training of AIs. Credit to NVIDIA, they saw the advantage of this back in 2012 and they significantly invested both from a GPU architecture as well as the development frameworks that live around that to make sure that you can squeeze every ounce of benefit out of the GPUs that you're deploying. To give you an idea, HPE, we've had a significant relationship with NVIDIA. We created our first NVIDIA AI Center of Excellence focused on computer vision in 2013 because we were one of the first organizations that NVIDIA came to and went, we want to take this stuff mainstream. So we've been working with NVIDIA for a very long period of time in terms of building out that how you layer in a comprehensive software ecosystem around the GPU onto the AI lifecycle management that you need and all of the other layers that give you this AI native architecture that ultimately means that deployment of AI services is incredibly simplified because it allows you to focus on the data that you've got, identification of the use cases that you can use that will exploit that data, and then how you can deploy them onto an AI native architecture that ultimately gives you the comprehensive top to bottom tech stack that allows you to, reduce the length of time it takes to get your AI systems into a production setting and ultimately allow, the time to value to be something that's going to drive benefit for your organization.
And that helps explain why NVIDIA is among the top stocks on the market today.
I think if you were to look at their share price when we first started working with them, specifically in AI in 2013 versus where they are now, they've had a significant increase in market capitalization. But it just goes to show from a HPE perspective, they wanted an organization who understood how to do enterprise-grade deployments of this type of technology. And it was HPE that they came to do that.
There seems to be quite a lot of a relationship between gaming and AI, doesn't it? I mean, a lot of the good things about AI came from people with a gaming background, for instance. Obviously, the chips came from gaming. Yourself got you into programming, didn't it?
Yeah,
gaming.
This is true.
So, yeah, it seems to be go gamers.
IT geek equals gamer, I think is probably the easiest way of phrasing it.
Yeah. So you seem very buoyant and positive and upbeat about the proliferation of AI technology innovation, Matt. But I wanted to flip that and just sort of ask you what you're most fearful of. What keeps you up at night in relation? What could go wrong with all this?
I think that's an interesting question. I think the challenges that I see are, one, if you don't understand the technology, it will allow you to make decisions significantly quicker and at significant volume, meaning you can make a lot of very bad decisions in a very short period of time. I think when it comes to generative AI techniques, we've a lot of unanswered questions around intellectual property, around copyright, around data loss prevention. So as a result, making sure that when you're doing generative AI projects, you're doing it with confidence around what's going to happen in that space. And a lot of the time that means bringing things into your security realm so that you've got greater control over those things. So I think those are definitely some challenging areas that we see going forward, especially with generative AI, because people think that it's giving you the right answer. And in actual fact, if you are creating a digital asset, by definition of the word creation, you have to make it up. And if you make it up, it might not always be right. And all generative AI techniques have a percentage probability that what they're telling you is wrong. So if we put too much stock, it's called hallucination, by the way. If we put too much stock in everything that large language models and generative AI techniques are creating, there is always going to be that probability that it's wrong. As a result, we have to fact check everything that comes out of, publicly available, large scale, provided by hyperscaler large language models, or we apply techniques. There's something called retrieval augmented generation, which is how I bring this into my environment, how I plug my data into it to ultimately provide some of that explainability, answers that use my data as core source material that the language models can then translate into the relevant textual output. So fact checking is definitely something I see organizations not doing enough of if they use large publicly available models. Secondly, I think if we have too much reliance on that, what we really need to start thinking about is small language models. So for example, if I have a specific problem, let's say I want to augment my development capability by providing a language model that can write them some code. If I have that, why do I need to use a language model that speaks German or Japanese or can write poetry? I don't. I need a language model that knows how to program in the languages that I want to use. As a result of that, it's going to use significantly less GPU memory, which means it's going to be cheaper to deploy. It's going to use less power to run. So it's about choosing the most appropriate tool for the job that you're trying to tackle instead of trying to say, well, actually, biggest is best. Because the latest thinking is actually smaller is better. So it's about choosing the smallest technique to tackle the problem that you're trying to address, because that uses significantly less power. It uses less cooling, and as a result is better for the environment. So fact-checking models is a concern that I'm not seeing enough organizations doing it and having the right kind of process around it. Organizations are trying to go with big is best, when in actual fact, it probably isn't. And also, when it comes to your data, your most important asset, if you're just pumping it out there into the wilds, you do run some significant challenges, of which we have not really got to the bottom of what they look like, who owns some of the risk associated with it. And even governments around the world have not wrestled with this problem to the point where it can give organizations complete confidence that the data they're providing into some of these services isn't going to be used and made available to, much more publicly.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, that's great, Matt. I mean, there's so much incredible content here. I don't really have any more questions. I think you've nailed all of them all of the things I wanted to talk about. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Just some incredible nuggets of wisdom there for our listeners. So thank you so much.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Matt.
Wow, Matt, what a fountain of knowledge. We've been really spoiled this time around, Kerensa, haven't we? I mean, Jamila was incredible. Jonathan was incredible. Maggie was obviously unbelievable. But Matt was definitely in the same mold, wasn't he? A fountain of knowledge all around.
Yeah, and in a very different way. I mean, he does speak tech, but he does it in a very accessible way. So he speaks tech in plain English, and he helps leaders understand, because also he understands the business imperatives. And I think that's what our listeners are looking to understand. It's like to demystify a little bit, what even is AI? What is GenAI? What's the difference? How can I use it? How to have those conversations either amongst your teams or at board level to help people kind of go on the journey about whether or not this tech might or might not be appropriate for you and your goals.
Strange how so many AI experts tend to come from a gaming background. I think the reason for that sort of trajectory, I think, is they're passionate technologists. And passionate technologists are often gamers for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
And I think Matt was no exception. But I that's why I challenged him, Kerensa, and put him on the spot and asked him to demystify AI to a 6-year-old. I asked him about how would I explain that to my daughter, because I messed it up. Well, how would you go about it? And I think it threw him a bit. But once he composed himself, he gave me a really good answer and something that I taken note of and will regurgitate going forward. But
I liked your explanation as well. I thought that was pretty good, actually.
I probably wasn't as good as his, but I think. I think it was just generally a really good overview of the mistakes that organizations make when trying to adopt AI or implement, AI capability?
Yeah, no, I think I completely agree. And I liked the fact as well that he was able to compartmentalize what he felt incredibly comfortable talking about and things that he felt were best for others to discuss. So, for example, he said, I'm not the person you want to talk to necessarily about the ethics of AI, because that's not my specialism, but there are lots of wonderful people who can give you a point of view on that. But actually, I can talk to you about the climate impacts, let's say, or when efficiencies might be lost. And he talked about the dangers of actually doing things in the wrong way, which actually end up costing businesses more in the end. And I thought that was a very illuminating insight.
Yeah, it was quite interesting how he wanted to stay away from ethics, though. It shows that it is very much a specific thing, and it's a bit of a minefield.
It's an evolving discipline.
Yeah. It is an evolving discipline, yes. And it will no doubt create lots of opportunities, and is one of those areas where, of course, lots and lots of jobs are going to be replaced, but lots and lots of jobs are also going to be created. And moving on to the collective then, okay? I think, I don't know what you think, Kerensa, but it certainly seemed to me that there was more positives than negatives in terms of the outlook. There seemed to be more excitement and optimism than pessimism or cynicism in terms of the collective, the guests that we obviously interviewed. Well, what was your thoughts on that?
Yes, I'm thinking back. So we had Maggie, we had Jair, we had Jamila, we had Matt, thinking through everybody's perspectives. I think what's wonderful about each and every one of them is they embrace experimentation and they embrace a kind of sense of adventure when it comes to tech. They all believe in the empowering power of tech, and each and every one of them comes with a perspective which was slightly different. So Maggie was from the perspective of how do you actually help young people get understand the potential of tech. With Jair, it's about kind of enterprise solutions, thinking about pension bee. It's about how do you actually think really, really carefully about that kind of implementation from an ethical standpoint, particularly when you're kind of dealing with something as sensitive and as important as privacy and people's money and things like that. Jamila blew my mind with some of her staggering statistics on the climate impacts. And as we've just sort of discussed, Matt was just a really fantastic person to give you a deep dive on some of the technical aspects that will give people the language to feel confident talking about this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was a really good mix of guests from all walks of life, wasn't there? There was obviously Maggie, who's obviously working with young people and has got an incredible overview of technology change over the years and technology innovation over the years. And it seemed like Maggie sort of acknowledged that this seems different. This seems like an enormous seismic shift. And then moving on to Jair, I think the car manufacturing industry is one that's going to be disrupted by robotics, AI, IoT, just technology generally. It's been massively impacted over the last couple of years, and I think it's going to have even more impact. But so it was amazing to see a company like Volvo be on the right side of that evolution and doing really cool things, especially around AI. I think Jonathan, obviously an ex-guest, one of the reasons I want to get Jonathan on is because he had a bit more of a cautious outlook, and I think it's important. I just wanted to get somebody on who had a bit more of to balance it up a bit, and it wasn't all sort of sunshine and rainbows. Jonathan has got a more of a cautious outlook, but I think all in all, he's got lots of positives about the whole thing as well. So I think that was a really interesting take. And then moving on to the masterclass from Jamila and also Matt.
Yes.
It was a fantastic combination of guests, which I really enjoyed chatting to all of them. They were all brilliant in their own way, weren't they?
Yeah.
But thank you so much, Kerensa. And on that bombshell, I think that's a great place to finish. But but look, thank you so much for being part of this. You've also been the star of the show, and I really enjoy working with you. Thank you so much for getting involved, Professor Kerensa Jennings, and we wish you a great Christmas and New Year.
It's my honour to be involved. I absolutely love it. I love working with you, Gareth. Thank you.
that's a wrap on our generative AI series. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe, share with your friends, your contacts, your colleagues. It really helps us reach more listeners and ensures we can keep delivering you the best guests through 2025. And we've got some fantastic guests lined up for the new year. I can't wait for you to hear what's next. But thank you so much for supporting us. Have a great Christmas, everyone. This episode was brought to you by Be Digital. Be Digital support leadership teams to optimize cost and get more out of technology investments. Be Digital and the team have unrivaled expertise with technology license management and data remediation and are therefore perfectly positioned to help prepare organizations for AI technology capability. And on the last point, Be Digital have developed a cutting-edge AI readiness assessment, which provides tech leaders with a platform they need to make well-informed decisions about AI adoption strategy in 2024 and beyond. Go to Be Digital UK to find out more and get in touch.